where in the Philippines, the son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos is about to be sworn in as the president. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. won last month's elections by a landslide. It's been a bit of a stunning comeback for the Marcos dynasty since Ferdinand Marcos was ousted by a popular revolt back in 1986. But later in the day today, Marcos Jr. will be taking oath in a public ceremony at the National Museum in Manila. And hundreds of local and foreign dignitaries will be a part of this ceremony. For the inauguration, more than 15,000 police, soldiers and Coast Guard personnel have been deployed across the capital. The Philippine economy is already ravaged by COVID-19. Moreover, rising prices are squeezing it further. In a country of about 110 million people, nearly a quarter of them live on less than $2 per day. And Marcos Jr. has made tackling inflation, boosting growth and ramping up food production his top priority. So these are in fact live visuals from the venue where the swearing-in ceremony will take place. The dignitaries have already assembled, so we expect the swearing-in ceremony, the oath-taking ceremony, to happen in some time. This of course, remember, a crucial point of inflection in the Philippine politics, where Marcos Jr. is all set to take charge of the top office in the Philippines. Meanwhile, the people in the Philippines are counting on their new president to deliver on the pledges of creating jobs and also bringing down consumer inflation. Now, Marcos Jr. has also appointed himself as the Agricultural Secretary to lead the overhaul of the plagued sector. He's also pledged to defend the country's rights to the disputed South China Sea, which Beijing claims as a part of its own territory. However, he's offered scant details on how he intends to go about achieving all the goals that he has promised. A 64-year-old Marcos Jr. succeeds the hugely popular Rodrigo Duterte. Duterte pivoted away from the United States towards China, but Marcos Jr. has indicated that he is likely to pursue a more balanced relationship with the two superpowers. Now, Marcos Jr. said last month that he will adopt a friends to all, enemy to none foreign policy. While he has backed Duterte's drug war, he is not likely to enforce it as aggressively. Now, the swearing-in comes just days after a last-ditch effort by the activists to thwart Marcos. The Supreme Court dismissed the final attempts to have Marcos Jr. disqualified from the election and to prevent him from taking charge of the office. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And hundreds of activists are expected to protest against the inauguration ceremony. So this of course is the venue where the swearing-in ceremony is expected to take place in some time. The dignitaries are all there. And this is of course a crucial change in the Philippine politics. How will things change from here on is anyone's guess, but the foreign policy is likely to be a lot different. Remember, the predecessor of Marcos Jr., Rodrigo Duterte, who was hugely popular in the Philippines. It's someone who had pivoted away from the United States and had been more closely leaning towards China. But Marcos Jr. has indicated that that is going to now change. He said that he will pursue a foreign policy that is more independent, stating that he intends to be a friend for all and an enemy to none. That's going to be a major change. Apart from this, Rodrigo Duterte's hugely notorious war on drugs, which a lot of human rights activists had in fact criticized for being trigger happy in the way it was implemented, is also not likely to be aggressively implemented by Marcos Jr. as he takes charge in Manila today. And we earlier spoke with Dave Gronebaum, who's a journalist who joined us live from Manila, and this is what he's had to say.
I'm actually in Quezon City, which is in Metro Manila, and I'm at one of the protest sites, and the protest is underway now. You can probably see some of the camera crews who are shooting it. Just on the other side of this camera crews is an artistic dance that's going on. Now, this site has particular importance and particularly significance to survivors of the torture during the Marcos dictatorship. He ruled from the mid-60s to the mid-80s, almost half of it under martial law. Thousands of people were tortured, killed, disappeared. There's a memorial wall just on the other side of that crowd that has the names of hundreds of people who were victims during the martial law era. And today, Marcos, who will take his oath of office as president, Marcos Jr., just a couple hours from now, well, today, coming up in just a few minutes, survivors of that torture, they're taking an oath to pledge that they will fight to keep the true history of what happened back then alive. The reason why that's so important is because one of the reasons why Marcos Jr. won the election is a massive social media disinformation campaign that whitewashed his father's record.
Dumaraan po sa hating harapan ang commander ng tropa, Major General Jonas R. Lumawag, Philippine Navy Marines. Ang unang brigada sa kasuotang gala ay nasa pamumuno ni Brigadier General Alvin P. Flores, Army. Ang unang batalyon ay binubuo ng Corps ng mga kadete ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas na
being streamed from Manila. There you see the man of the moment at this point of time, Marcos Jr. there, seated and ready to be sworn in a short while from now. He's the son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, and the return to power of Marcos Jr. completes the clan's return to power this morning. And a lot of things are likely to change. This is, of course, going to be a pivotal moment for the Philippines in terms of its foreign policy and also in terms of how the domestic politics within the country will also run. Remember, Marcos Jr. has stormed back to power by promising several things. Firstly, he said that he will improve the job condition in the Philippines. He's also said that he'll bring down consumer inflation. This, of course, has been a major challenge for the last couple of years across so many countries, and this is a major challenge for the people in the Philippines as well. The pomp and ceremony surrounding this swearing in indicates the seriousness of the change of guard that is taking place in Manila. And the man you're looking at the center on your screen is Marcos Jr., who will now be the top leader of the Philippines after the swearing-in ceremony that is expected to happen in some time. He, of course, succeeds the hugely popular Rodrigo Duterte, who had gained international infamy for his deadly drug war and had threatened to kill suspected dealers. The Marcos Jr. will take oath at midday in a public ceremony at the National Museum in Manila in front of hundreds of locals and foreign dignitaries and journalists. And this is quite an extraordinary ceremony for an oath-taking ceremony that is slated to take place a little while later. This is an interesting parade, which of course is being held just ahead of the swearing-in ceremony of Marcos Jr.
Commander Ray R.G. Habonete ng Navy. Binubuo ang batalyon ng Scout Ranger at Special Forces ng Philippine Army, Naval and Special Operations Group ng Philippine Navy at 7th Special Operations Wing ng Philippine Air Force. Sila mga piling individual na ang kasanayan ay sa iba't ibang larangan at nakakaangat lalo na sa mga espesyal na operasyon. Narito naman ang batalyon na binubuo ng kapulisan at tanod baybayin na pinamumunuan ni Police Lieutenant Colonel Joseph C. Bayan. Ang ating kapulisan na tagapagpatupad ng batas ay papanatili ng kapayapaan at kaayusan at nagsisiguro sa kaligtasan ng ating mamamayan. Ang tanod baybayin ay nakatuon sa maritime search and rescue, maritime law enforcement, maritime safety, marine environmental protection at maritime security. Tunghayan natin ang mga sasakyan at gamit pandigma ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, Pambansang Pulisya ng Pilipinas at Tanod Baybayin ng Pilipinas, gayon din ang mga tauhang kabilang sa mga espesyal na unit, kasama na din po ang pansuportang unit. Nangunguna ang mga espesyal na unit ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas. Nariyan po ang Explosive Ordnance and Disposal Units, kabilang na rin po ang Chemical, Biological and Radiological Nuclear Teams. Sumusunod naman po ang Kia Light Tactical Vehicle at Troop Carrying Vehicle. Narito rin po ang 11 metrong rigid hull inflatable boat ng Naval Special Operations Group ng Philippine Navy. Ginagamit ito sa mga espesyal na operasyon bilang suporta sa maliitang SEAL operation.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.